hackmd, so the OAuth is timing out on me.
You can probably read it without permissions, but you probably only need sign in to edit it. I could change that here.
No, that's okay. I think it's having the sign in is typically not that hard. I think Google's OAuth is bugging out right now.
Okay. I mean, there's no security here. Roughly in 2 hours, I'll move it all to a PR anyhow.
Okay, it works. I got it. Cool.
Oh well, now everyone has write access.
Okay. All right.
So we've been trying to start with highlights from the last meeting, shout outs, etc. Things people wrote here were fixes to the table, which implement indexes or do not, which was the PR from Packet 0. Lots more porting in of the third-party libraries to source. So that's pretty cool. It's been Teddy and Zach. I looked over the PRs and saw a whole bunch of stuff and couldn't really make it any simpler, but thanks for everyone who's been submitting stuff. There's a whole lot of stuff I saw merged.
Yeah, we may have covered this last time too, but it's worth calling out the most recent milestone tag, the 410, re-adds the extension support for C++. So you can build an extension using the Osquery repo. That's pretty awesome. Thank you to everybody who is involved in that. I think going into this week, the most important thing to talk about is how we get to a published state of that milestone, which involves following up on some of the feedback from the initial testing of 410. And so we've been trying to capture all of that into the 411 milestone, or yeah, the milestone is a milestone, but isn't really a milestone release. So as soon as those are all finished, another round of testing we'll ask of everyone. And if everything looks good, then we'll publish all of those packages as well as update the repos.
So I would be inclined to run through the issues here. I don't know if at this point they're all pretty simple or if they merit conversation, but it's probably worth bringing them up at least.
Yeah, let's see if any of them have any ambiguity that needs to be resolved.
So the first one is that the Osquery v4 breaks compatibility with older Mac OSes, which I think Teddy, you patched that with a thing. I don't know that we merged it though.
So that and the issue number 6000, which is a pull request, is to recommend 10.11 as a deployment target and then update the Azure testing to also use that flag. The concern brought up around that is very valid in that there may be some side effects of doing this because we're essentially using pre-built libraries that didn't have this tag, and then we would be building the Osquery code as well as some portion of third-party libraries with this flag. And so the resolution to this is to get all of the third-party libraries that are being built on macOS to be using the source layer, which is what we've been trying to do over this last week, but it's difficult.
So, I mean, what I observed with only a very small amount of testing is that if I added that build tag in, I did not have any problems. Like my Osquery ran, I could query stuff, but like I did not do an exhaustive query all tables.
Right.
So I feel like there's almost a question of where we are today. If we wanted to release 411, we can either release it with the SDK targeting the newer macOS, which means that we're basically just saying no support for anything older than High Sierra, or we can build it with an appropriate earlier flag, which may result in some unknown error against some third-party library that we haven't had a problem with yet. Does that sound like the right?
That's a good summary. Yeah.
So, I mean, I kind of don't want to hold 4.1.1 up on moving everything into the source layer. My inclination is to build against the old SDK since we haven't seen an issue yet, but that's a weakly held opinion.
Thoughts from the audience?
Yeah, I'm not too much used on how, in general, an macOS SDK works, but I'm still a bit wary of if they use global state or whatever between different SDK, and if that gives instabilities. But yeah, if someone has like more information and experience, definitely I will.
Garub, I'd love to hear if you've got input. You're one of the Mac people.
Well, I want to deprecate the old SDK, but we need to look at the converting the new log API.
I don't know how to interpret that. I'm sorry.
We've been building Osquery with a very old SDK, as far as I know, right? 10.12.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, actually, we are building 10.14 right now.
Oh, okay.
That's what, yeah. Also, the pre-built libraries are 10.14.
I mean, the core problem.
Go ahead.
The core problem is that, so when we cut over to the Azure pipelines, we started building with whatever was stock, which I think is 10.14 or 10.13. The problem with that is that breaks compatibility for older macOS releases. So they're officially out of support from Apple, but do we actually have them across our user base? And that's hard to answer. So like if you want Osquery to run on El Capitan or Sierra, you need to build with an older SDK. Full stop.
Yeah, I mean, we deprecate releases like that. So we don't have anything that's older than a year. But, I don't see anybody who's security conscious running those versions and allowing those versions to need to be checked with Osquery, but every organization is different. So I don't know, maybe it's okay to deprecate and post some instructions for like how to build with an old SDK. Ted?
Yeah, in the past, we've always said like Osquery is an added benefit once you have continuous release and like control of your organization's deployment. And one expectation there would be that you can upgrade operating systems. So we shouldn't be holding ourselves back because of that. But in reality, there is no difference if we add the SDK. In my experience, it only affects the linking. And so like what symbols are available to you. And so I don't think we're holding Osquery back by using the build SDK, except for the delay that we're imposing right now. So maybe a good balance here is by the end of the week, if we don't have all libraries to the source layer, so it sort of gives us like a week of flexibility. If we don't have that done, then we go forward with how it is right now, which means no flag.
So, I mean, I'll mention that across the Collide user base, we have definitely encountered people still running Sierra.
Okay.
I find this completely baffling, and we convince them to just upgrade. But, you know, there were a couple out there.
Okay, that's helpful. And Actually, you know what? So you brought up a good perspective. Like, Osquery as a visibility tool can help you identify operating systems that you need to upgrade, like if one is lost. And so we take away that ability for you to find those things and then take action if we don't allow Osquery to run on those operating systems.
To me, it's also very similar to the Linux. Like we went through some amount of work to ensure that we're building against an older Linux glibc there, so that we have a big range of compatibility targets. So it's very similar feeling to me of, I would rather that when we deprecate an older OS that it's driven by like really clear, we need features in the new OS, and then we can have a conversation about those trade-offs than like, oh, oops, we forgot to pass a build argument.
Yeah. So if someone wants to help with this right now, Augeus, libarchive, lib, Kafka, line noise, LLDPD, popt, rocksdb, sleuthkit, smartmon tools, ssdeep, and yara. That's our target. Most of those are auto tools based builds, and so it means running the configure and like expertly analyzing the output of the features that are available, matching that to the other autocomp like examples that we have, and then moving them to source migration. It's not easy to do, and the list is kind of long. So this is a hard decision of whether we require it or not.
I mean, I said my bias would be to build with the old SDK.
Yeah.
And then if someone raises a flag, like if someone says, hey, this didn't work, then we should go and change that. Because I feel like we're sort of cutting out older platforms for a reasonable but also unsubstantiated fear.
Okay. Yep. I mean, the point that Stefano brought up about inconsistencies in global state, these libraries are pretty distinct from each other. So the chances of them relying on global state and taking one action versus something else in the code base also relying on that global state and being linked with the different SDK and thus taking a different action. I think that's rare enough that we can take the risk.
Okay.
Maybe RocksDB would be like
Sounds good to me.
Like RocksDB would be the one thing.
I feel like we should see problems fast, though. Like if there's an issue in RocksDB.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we just said we're okay building against the older API, and we should just merge 6000, I guess.
Yeah, I'd like to see RocksDB though ported, which I can take on. It's fine.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't feel like I'm spun up on how to move things into the source layer.
Stefano and Alessandro have made it really easy, but yeah.
Yeah, there's still a lot of tools. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna keep going down the 411 list. Ensure that the new package generator is tested on CI. Is that actually critical for 411?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I'm just gonna skip that and ditto the chocolatey one. I know Muffin is working on those, but I don't know that they're really release blocking. The Osquery I incorrect user warnings issue. 6001.
I was thinking about this morning. So there might be a way to fix this. If you go into the pull request, the pull request essentially removes this feature, which is like a user experience feature.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason we have to do this is because we're now returning an SQLite underscore constraints error from xbest index, which means that filter doesn't get a chance to run, which means you don't see the error message. That is ideal. So what we have right now is what we should have. On virtualtable.cpp on line 118 is the new like return an SQLite error code. We could move this warning to that line. My concern there was that sometimes I've observed that xbest index gets run several times. I think that's by design for SQLite because it's trying to find the best. The planner is trying to find the like minimize the cost of executing or selecting against the table. And so it runs SPEC index with several different configurations, it finds the best cost, and then uses that. So if we put the error message there on line 118 in xbest index, you could see it multiple times per table select. It's not ideal, but it's not the worst case scenario. What I wanted to do is test this and see if that's actually true, or if xbest index just completely gives up as soon as it hits an SQLite underscore constraint error. So that if we do put the line there, we're certain that someone would only see it once. Does that make sense? I think, Alex, you might have ideas here.
No, I think you're right. I think it does call it multiple times. I can't remember if it bails out once it gets that. Yeah, particularly if you have multiple tables involved.
Yep.
I did quickly check the SQLite code. I know that it basically transformed that SQLite constraint in a SQLite OK. So, and it goes on, so meaning that, yeah, it doesn't interrupt any planning. So you totally lose the the error, basically.
Okay.
Yeah,
The version of SQLite in 3.3.1, it did the right thing and gave you an error.
You're breaking up.
So in the older version of SQLite 3 inside our 3.3.1 branch, it gave a useful error.
Huh.
What was the useful error? Because the only thing I've seen is there's no query solution.
That's a useful error.
I mean, it is, yeah.
I think it had something to do with missing constraints.
Okay.
Is there somewhere we can? So I don't know the SQLite code as well as I wish I did. Is there somewhere where we can basically catch that higher up and then trigger the constraint check and issue a warning?
Well, so I tried here on that line 118. I tried to set an SQLite error that was essentially the like, hey, you're using this table wrong. Go look at the docs, and that gets lost. I didn't look at the SQLite code, but it might be what Stefano was mentioning, where the error just gets transformed into a SQLite OK. There is an option to output that error here and then record a bit on the virtual table that says like error has been shown, and check that, not show it a second time.
I think that my guess is, so if the query planner in fact runs this multiple times, I think that we're going to get ourselves into trouble, because what might happen is the warning would show up, but then a solution is found, right? Because we'd see this. The theory is that we would see this when the constraint planner is trying things where it's not actually passing that along.
Yeah.
So I think probably more experimentation is needed. Maybe a different question here. Is this 411 blocking?
Yes.
This is just like warnings displayed to user, right?
Yes, but also like logged in, like the status logger should be aggregated somewhere and should be a source of like what problems am I having in my Osquery deployment? And so seeing that someone added something to the schedule that isn't using a table correctly is very actionable.
Oh, absolutely. I think as is, does the status logger get no query solution found?
It does.
So we're getting something, but we're losing useful information.
Yep.
So
Most
I would
people query it anyways, or Google it, and they'll find the answer.
while I'd like to fix it, I also wouldn't want to block 411 on it.
Okay. Sure. So the question I have
Yep.
is, so cool, fixing it is not 411 blocking. I can understand that. However, the pull request that I have up, which removes the feature to protect against ambiguity, I think that should land. It's like we either don't have it or we have it, but I don't like this like intermediate state where if you're looking at the code, you can see that it should happen, but then we know that that will never happen. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. I just feel like I don't want to commit removing it if we're trying to fix it.
Well, maybe there's like a short term, let's remove it. And then a long term, let's find a way to reintroduce it. Because like it's just dead code right now.
I agree, and I have the same I'm torn because like I don't want dead code, but I also know that if we remove it, like the likelihood that we'll fix it goes down.
Not only is it dead code, but it's like it's not dead code, it's code that's being executed that doesn't have any function. And it's very core in Osquery, so like you're losing CPU cycles for this.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Stefano, for interrupting you.
No, I was just wondering, I didn't look at it enough, but we do have, in theory, the virtual table pointer and a specific instance of that table, which we could collect information there from expected index, maybe.
Yep.
Just like, so if there are multiple planning and yeah, you know, if the last one didn't fail, you just disable the error and all is good. The only question though is if that instance is really private for each query, basically.
Yeah.
Because yeah.
The error is definitely on the table because you're using the table wrong. So I think that's ideal. Like your complex query is you're expecting to have some constraints into one table, and that's not happening. But right now, like the no query solution would be at the query level. So you would get an error that says tried to execute this query and I couldn't find a solution. If that makes sense.
Well, I was just wondering about multi-threading and multiple queries in flight that will access the same value. But yeah, we can explore.
Yeah, that shouldn't happen. Yeah, that shouldn't happen. It can happen. The shouldn't. There is a mutex protecting that private state.
Okay.
So bouncing slightly, what are our next steps for this?
Land the pull request.
Remove the dead code, create an issue for re-adding the functionality.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyone want to argue another way on that? Okay, then.
I can take that. Well, I can make the issue.
Okay, so that's one cool. We talked about 6,000 already. And the last thing we have in the 411 release is extensions compatibility, which Jason, I, and Alex kind of all found, so that was fun. Grub, you asked what this one was. The column index constraint work that Alex did earlier also ended up applying to extensions, which meant that every extension suddenly wouldn't get any of the columns unless they had declared them as important, which none of the SDKs supported, so no one did.
Right. I guess my question is, how are we moving forward? Are we rolling that back for now, or are we fixing all the extensions in a hurry?
The PR that Alex set up basically only rolls it back for extensions. So extensions don't have that functionality, and then we can reason about what a depreciation cycle looks like in the future.
Okay. Have we thought about potentially making the Thrift API more concrete? Like right now, the Thrift API is very loose. It's like, here's a map of things, and there might contain values, and if it does contain these particular values, then do something. But it's not very much of an API contract. Like I was thinking, a better API would be something that resembles how we've done the Go SDK, where it's like, here's what an RPC for a table plugin looks like, and here's what an RPC for a log looks like, and then doesn't matter what language. Well, first of all, it makes generating the SDK for every language a lot easier, because it just once you generate the thrift gen, you don't have to go and implement the plugin types, because they're just there for you, and you just have to implement the transport. And then we don't end up with breaking issues like that. So. I don't know what the convention, I mean, for Proto, that would be the convention. I don't know what the convention for Thrift is, but.
I would suggest you open a Blueprint issue. I would wholly back having a stricter API.
Okay.
I think it would also be really neat if we talked about pulling in, if we had a stricter API and we sort of supported like Thrift and Proto or something and whatever else. But that's like Osquery v5 or v6 or something.
Yeah, unfortunately, Proto, I've explored this a bit, doesn't do very well with local sockets, like especially for Windows and stuff. Like it's meant to just be TCP, and we wouldn't want to open that for Osquery.
Well, either way, I think major API changes are a major rel. So I would totally support a stricter API. If you open up Blueprint, I'll stick it here. Does anyone want to say anything about what's this bug? 6006. I think it's a pretty reasonable, pretty small patch. So I would say we include it as soon as Teddy and Alex hash it out.
We already did. Yeah, it's good to go. Someone can merge it right now if they want.
I guess the other corollary to this is we've never really planned through like depreciation things. So, if we decide we want to make these flags required, like what is the timeline for doing that, and how do we give notice? And
do you want to talk about that now, or like to?
I just want to throw that out if other people want to pick it up.
Yeah.
That's everything on the 411 milestone.
Cool.
So the thing we normally do first are see if anyone wants to talk about any PRs that are pending. I mentioned that Puffy Sid pinged us on a couple of PRs on Slack, and I couldn't quite wrap my head around the Windows side of them this morning, so I didn't do anything. But I don't know if anyone else is up for looking. This is 5539 and 5831. So I kind of just want to throw that out there to people. They're pretty deep in Windows stuff, so I don't really understand Windows best practices, or if there's like a better API to be using, or if he's kind of got the correct approach of like take this data and then slice and dice it in C++ versus take this data and like cast it through the Windows WMI functions. It's all pretty foreign to me.
Which PR was that in particular?
5539 and 5831. Do you want those in Slack?
Yeah, actually, if you wouldn't mind, if you've got it and you can ping them to me, I'll take a look at them.
Okay, cool.
I missed those Slack pings though this morning. I haven't checked Slack in a minute.
Oh, they were from a little while ago.
Oh shit. Okay, I can
don't
give them
bad.
a review.
Don't feel bad.
Oh sure. I just mean I can. I don't mind taking a look.
Okay. I know some of them should change. This actually reminds me that you've got pending PRs on the date conversion stuff, which would be good to get merged.
Yeah. On that one, that PR is waiting in particular on bringing the tests to Buck, and I don't exactly know what I'm doing to get those things hooked up. I gave it a really shitty attempt to try to get them up and running, but I'm getting some linking issues. And so Ted, I actually pinged you because I know that you're the other kind of heavy Buck user. If you get a second and you have a chance to kind of like spot what it is I'm missing, I'm getting some weird Google logging linking issues on Windows. And I have no idea what I'm doing.
Where is this? What?
It's the, let me give you the number.
Okay.
5908. And I would bet that I'm just missing something because all I try to do is add in the source files to the platform bits. And on Windows, these get hooked up and like it tries to compile them, but it fails at the link step. And I ran it on Mac OS and there's like no issues on Mac, but I don't know if did this late last night. So I don't know if it's actually running the tests or if it's missing them somehow.
Okay, I'll take a look.
Yeah, I would bet I'm just missing something really simple and stupid. But I wanted to get that landed so that way we could add tests to the date conversion PR. So the 5901, I wanted to get a test written for that before we ship it. But I'll get those rebased because they're pretty straightforward and I think we could ship those really quick.
Okay.
I think.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. So I just wanted to say about the PR. I think that part of the issue is the issue I opened about the fact that some libraries do not link all they should. So meaning we have actually a bigger problem. This is also present in CMake because it has been copied by Buck. So I don't know if you saw my comment. I can link it again somewhere. Well, basically, yeah.
Was it in that PR?
Yeah.
Yeah, I read your comments.
The linker issue is because file system depends on other libraries which are not correctly expressed here. For instance, there were Osquery SQL, third party.
And third party. So what? I saw that comment.
Yeah.
But what was confusing to me was that like to kind of like troubleshoot this and to mess around with it, I pulled it out into its own tests definition. So that way it wasn't inside of the platform sources. And I like added a bunch of the different linking dependencies. Oh, so, all right. So I guess what you're saying is that there's like, if I have a link dependency, it's not necessarily going to pull in all of that dependencies. Is that kind of what you're saying? Because like it could be that I have the glog dependencies or the file system dependencies, but they're not pulling in the extra ones, and that's why the linker is failing. Yeah.
Some of those they use do not directly depend on it wrongly, so they do not pull it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So it could be just that I have to keep. Jesus. Yeah. So like walk down the dependency chain of glog to try to figure out which link is because that's confusing, right? And sort of frustrating because it just says that glog link is failing, not that some dependency of glog is failing.
Well, no, I'm not sure. I think that's another take. What I was saying is that if you expect some of those linker error to not be present because you already linked to something that should pull it in, it might happen that it actually do not, because
right. And that makes sense. I mean, the way I did it this way in this PR in particular, just because it seemed like that these conversion tests would fit better under this conversion tests branch, and they could just be platforms. And it seemed like all of the dependencies were already handled, right, by the conversions lib. So like, it could just be that there's some linking bit, some nuance to the linking like you're describing. I can keep just like brute forcing this and adding extra dependencies to get it to work, but I really didn't want to do that because it would be gross, right? So
this is a big issue, though.
yeah,
Just looking at the code in general, it's very interdependent, and this sort of took up all of my weekend, not this past weekend, but the weekend before, is to try to like decouple everything. And I don't think we can get started on this just yet, but like a longer term, maybe sometime next half, we should work on that.
Ted, I would really love to learn more about the Buck build system. Like, I'm getting better at it internally, but like, if you need help with that, with decoupling dependencies or like restructuring things, please let me know.
Yeah, we have to move a lot of code around though.
Okay. Do you say that just to kind of infer that like we might not want to do that? I mean, why would that be a bad thing?
Yeah. Just not right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
I did have
the issue that like other people are running into with like gigabyte size text, and like that'll all go away. I don't think the build is slowed down a lot by all the linking that happens everywhere, but theoretically, like the build would be faster and maybe more parallelizable. Not more parallelizable because we split out the links, but more parallelizable if we just split out some of the interdependency of the code. So there are like a lot of benefits, and I think the code actually becomes a little bit easier to understand if you do that. So it's worthwhile, but just not right now.
I feel a little bad because that's this huge stack of dependencies for Puffy sits tables, but I think it's probably the right thing. He's not here, so he can't advocate for himself. Sorry. I pulled out a couple of other recent PRs if people wanted to talk about them. Alessandro submitted a blueprint for containers, and Nishant has the pending event logging one. I don't know if anyone wants to speak to any of that. Okay, I will hear resounding silence is silence, but you know, they're hanging out, so feel free to look at them if you want. The other thing I added here is Teddy and I were talking about release process. This is over in 6005. I think Teddy and I maybe are on the same page about how we sort of think release processes should work. Let me read it to the group and encourage you all to go look at this ticket if you want to weigh in on that discussion. We think that tags are immutable. We do not believe in RC tags. So we just tag stuff with like 410. Hopefully CI and CD will build packages. Then they'll go through some kind of bake cycle, and then we will promote them to our various stable channels and like click the stable release button. I think that's everything we said. Sound right to you, Teddy?
Sounds good, yeah.
The corollary to this that I want to call out is that if you are looking at an Osquery package, you have no way to tell if it's a stable release, which I think is fine. That's the reality.
Yep.
someone has added the Aegeus MOTD lens, which was a comment I made. I don't remember if I made it into an issue or not.
That's a good comment. Yeah. Before we move on to that, I think the container blueprint is important. Like, I think this is pretty outstanding for the capabilities that Osquery has, and like interested in advocating for that and how we can like not get that in ASAP, but like get that in like the right version and when it makes sense to get that in.
I would absolutely love to see the functionality, and I would encourage people to read and comment on the blueprint.
Is this for 5975? The containerization one?
I think so.
Yes, 5975, correct.
Just making sure I'm looking at the right one.
Alessandro, I think, isn't here. I was talking to him about it. His major concern was that this had to pull in a fork functionality, and generally Osquery is not super fond of fork exec models. My view is that if this is the only way to get this functionality, it's absolutely the right thing to do.
Yeah, I cannot do that. Yeah, there's no other way, because you need to be on a process with only one thread. So yeah, the main thread to be able to join a container namespace. So
yeah.
So yeah, anyhow, I agree, it's great. I'd love to see it in. So
Okay. I just wanted to call out that like it's pretty awesome, and like we should put effort if we have effort into it.
okay.
Yeah, it'd be a hard one to test at scale, right? On some servers with lots of containers. Our unit testing, integration testing won't be enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, what it probably needs is like someone to sign up as a tester, like a trusted tester, and be close with turning on the beta feature and just like giving lots of feedback about how it's working. I think like after a while, you do find ways to do like end-to-end testing or like integration testing of small bits of it that do guarantee the performance that you're expecting. But it just, we'll need that like person who can deploy it that has lots of containers. Yeah.
I might hypothesize that if Alessandro is doing this work, he has a need for it.
Yeah. Yeah, so 10 minutes left. For the next milestone for 420, I think the only thing that was on there was just landing the integration tests and then having a automated release. Do we still want that? And when do we want to plan for having a 420?
Can I also add that there's also updating OpenSSL to the 1.1.1 version, which means also porting everything to the source layer on macOS and Windows, because OpenSSL pre 1 is end of life by the end of this year. So,
but OpenSSL is already in the source layer for all the platforms.
The problem is that we have pre-built libraries, which depends on OpenSSL and uses the older version. So,
okay. I remember, so I can go back and look at pull request. I remember someone doing the conversion. They added like a preprocessor level to do either 102 or 111. We could explore that too, but I don't like that solution. I've seen the code written for it already, so it's not like it would be a lot of work, but I don't like that solution. I like
yeah, you don't want to mix. Well, yeah, I said also all. Actually, I was thinking, well, all the libraries that depends on OpenSSL needs to be ported to the source layer, so they probably are much less, yeah, than all the third-party libraries we have. So that's more doable.
So you're saying the problem is resolved if we finish up the migration to the source layer for the other libraries?
Yeah, no, well, it's not necessary. Meaning there are two parts. So even if we right now update to OpenSSL 111, we still have pre-built libraries which uses the old OpenSSL version. So there's no way beyond having them built as from source. There's no way to have them use the correct version. So we have to maybe make a list of those libraries. I didn't check which one those are. So probably they are not so many, and yeah, we can do that without having everything on the source layer.
But there's also API changes, so our code right now would have to be changed.
Yeah, but yeah.
Oh, so
I,
So the new formula build of OpenSSL is still using the older version.
Yeah.
I see.
Which is not like, this isn't a dire problem, it's just something we need to get ahead of, right? We should have been ahead of. All right, okay, it's a problem. Like, we should prioritize this.
Well,
absolutely. We should prioritize this.
it's OpenSSL. I mean,
yes. Cool.
Sounds like
one thing I'd like to bring up before we lose Alex, which is quite that I saw this new cached logger mechanism that was introduced in, I don't remember the PR number, but maybe someone can look that up while I'm talking. But basically, no one's done thorough review yet, it looks like, but I did skim it, and what I see is that Alex rebuilt the logger buffering mechanism using flat files rather than RocksDB, and saw a pretty substantial performance improvement from doing that. I guess while we have Alex, I just want to get a little bit of an understanding of, is this something that you think we should be moving all the loggers to? And the other thing I'd really like to know is this something that you guys have deployed and seen widely working well, at least in the case of Kinesis?
Yeah, so we deployed it back in, I want to say, March. So yeah, we've been using it, and it was a significant performance improvement for servers, for example. And yes, the goal was to also change TLS logger to use it, but we just haven't done it because we use Kinesis still.
Okay, awesome. I mean, it's great to know that this is something that you guys have been using and it's been tested in production now. And I will get some more thorough eyes on it at some point. And I'm pretty familiar with how the logging plugins work and the buffering mechanisms work. So this is probably some work that I could take on to continue refactoring other plugins to start using that if it's something that other folks are on board with.
Awesome, thanks.
It sounds like a great idea to me. I'll probably caveat one thing, which is that I don't think Alex is running this code in production because they're on a very different Osquery base.
Yeah, my changes are the same, but yeah, the code base is different.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we know that and don't assume otherwise. I'll also say, Alex, I'll miss you. You've done great work. I'll
Thank
be
you.
sad not to see you here. And have your
We'll
input
just
on
have to
everything.
pop in every couple of
Every 2 weeks, every
days,
couple
yeah.
of weeks.
So I saw that somebody posted a conference link. Who's behind that?
Upticks is behind that, and I don't know many details about it.
Do we have anyone from Upticks here today who could maybe fill us in?
Yeah, I was interested in why they needed a conference of their own, but they do kind of maintain an Osquery fork based on upstream. So this is just a continuation of that sort of fork, I guess.
Do they maintain a fork for public consumption, or merely a fork that they distribute to their customers?
I don't think that they're contributing right now. Could be wrong, but
No, I mean, if I wanted to go and use their fork of Osquery, can I do that, or is it only part of their general EDR solution?
are you thinking that maybe they're in violation of the license?
No, not at all. You
not
mentioned
sure.
that creating a conference felt in line with a fork, and I'm saying I'm not sure they have a fork if it's wholly an internal distribution.
Okay, well, if it's just a question of nomenclature, I don't know. But I haven't looked for a way to look at their version. I know some of our clients have switched to that, and so they've stopped asking us for funded improvement on the upstream version, which doesn't make sense because that funded improvement would eventually make its way back into their fork, you would assume. But that's not how they see it. So they see it as, I pay upticks for this, so I'm going to pay them for improvement.
Yeah, as far as I know, they don't have they're not distributing a fork. They have an internal fork that they use for their commercial SaaS solution.
Yeah.
And I do not think that's in violation of any of our licensing agreements. You know, the nature of open source is it allows them to do that.
Yeah, I don't think it is either. So
We should have a.
But if anyone at Upticks is listening, we'd love to have you guys running mainline Osquery and contributing upstream. So just throwing that out there.
We should do a call to action for like, hey, let's find out who has a private version that they're maintaining, and let's get everyone kind of together to see like what is blocking using the current version, because like that's one of the goals that we've been trying to focus on recently. And then also like what interesting features have they added that, I think the expectation to submit those as pull requests is very high, but maybe they can just at least, when I say they, I mean this community of people that are maintaining these branches can talk to us about what they've improved, and so we can work on getting those features back in mainline.
One thing that I'm worried about, worried is a strong word. One thing that I expect is that, so I expect there to be two sets of problems that we encounter. And maybe I shouldn't say anything because we haven't done this research yet. But generally, commercial entities tend to either feel like their branches and patches are secret sauce and they don't want to share them. So it's like a common thing you see. And the other thing we probably see is, people forked and then kind of the world changed and it's very hard to reintegrate. And my guess is that's where Alien Vault is, for example. So it's like, it's a long road.
It's a long road, and there's very little incentive to go through the process to submit your work and get it nitpicked to death, which some people get upset about. I don't mind. It's just a lot of extra work, and I'd much rather say, here's our branch, have at it, which I've done, but nothing happens, right?
It's a lot of
I mean,
work.
on the flip side, if people are staying integrated, then they benefit from all the changes that other folks are making.
And also, that's also a double-edged sword, right? You have to vet every change internally, right, before it hits your customers.
And there's this balance, right? Like Facebook has talked a little bit about this in terms of a lot of what we're doing in the mainline one doesn't particularly benefit Facebook directly. So I love that we have Nick and Teddy here, but I think the absence of Ryan speaks to that a little bit.
I had engaged with Ryan about this. I don't know what process needs to happen, but I'm trying to sort of take his spot because he is very busy with other things, I guess, and just I guess isn't going to make this a point of time for him. I still I'm not on that team actively, but I still linger in a bunch of their groups, so I do still have a little bit of like insight into what they're working on. But I think I mentioned this before, like most of their attention has been focused around internal integration. It hasn't really been on the core Osquery product itself. It's on like the biggest stuff I've seen was their continuous build and continuous push, which was all our internal thing we call Sandcastle. So I'm hoping that I can like take Ryan's place and kind of act as that stand-in and help contribute back where we see valuable feature sets, but there really hasn't been much yet.
But I mean, I imagine much like what Alex said, if you contribute a thing and then we nitpick it to death, like where's that gonna go?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of used to that flow. Like Ted and I have gone through those rings, but sorry, go ahead.
No, I said it just needs to move faster, I think. Take things in pieces and maybe, have people help out to conform to style.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we what miss is a bit of a common view maybe on those small things, which we have, which if we have a documentation, or if we simply prepare some of tools like TrainTidy or things like that, it's then pretty easy because who's preparing the code can.
So just as a time check, it's now 2 p.m. Many of us seem quite capable of staying and chatting, and there are probably some interesting corollaries to this that I'd love to talk through, but if people want to end this and get going, that's okay too.
Yeah, I need to drop off. Thank you all very much for the time. Take it easy.
Okay.
Thanks for everything. Is Alex still on the call?
No, he's gone.
Well, I hope we see Alex and Vern. Welcome. So the thing that we sort of didn't talk about that someone added here was the Aegeus MOT-D lens. I'm not sure who added that. Teddy looks like he's also dropped.
Yeah, someone posted on Slack that someone was asking a question, how do I read an Nginx config? And someone said you can also use like a message of the day lens, which can pull an arbitrary file, but it seems like it's not shipped by default, at least according to what little research I have done. So
I thought we shipped those lenses.
I don't think message of the day is included by default in ArcGIS. But yeah, I think Teddy might have tried and tested this. I'm not sure.
I sort of have a different question about this, maybe. And this isn't a thing to have an answer for, but like, how do we as Osquery feel about arbitrary file system reads? We support it through the carving table, which requires a command line flag to enable. Do we choose to support tables that basically allow unfettered access to the file system?
I think this is a bigger discussion because I remember MD find being disabled also.
I don't think we disabled that, but it did come up.
There was a discussion about that as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to disable tables before deploying, so.
Yeah, I mean, giving people an option to disable functionalities is probably good. Maybe disabling them by default is good, maybe, as discussion. But in order to really prevent any sort of leak of private information, you really can't be opening various doors a crack and expect it to really protect things. I mean, just thinking from a forensic perspective, things are always being leaked into the registry, or fragments that maybe we're reading already. So we can make a best attempt to not make it easy to divulge personal data, but there probably is a way that is some clever repurposing of an existing table that would give you data that you shouldn't have.
That's sort of where I am, right? I agree, we can't be perfect, right? We're not running Osquery in a heavily rooted namespaced environment, and we can't. So there's always going to be some leaks. But I feel like we should think about what the ideal is, and something like the Aegeus Mott-D lens doesn't sound like a lot of value, and sounds like it would surprise people in how it leaks data. So I would not ship it. The registry table, I have a different trade-off for. So I don't know. It's just it's a broader request to the group to start thinking about those ideals.
At least with
It would be nice
Aegeus.
to. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
With Aegeus, like the link that I posted, like it does a reasonable job of documenting which files are included and which files it excludes. But I haven't used this before, so I don't know how up to date or current your documentation is.
I was saying that it's not exactly clear from the schema what kind of data you can leak from each table. It would be nice to at least inform the user what kind of data you could access with each table enabled, rather than trying to prevent leaks.
Okay, well, that's what I've got on the agenda. Anyone want to bring up anything else?
Nothing further from here.
Well, thank you all. And it sounds like we'll probably get 411 out real soon now. So that's exciting. And wonderful.
Yeah, great. We'll announce it in our Trail of Bits newsletter too if it's ready in time.
Really not great. All right, guys. Gonna go grab lunch. Thanks.
All right. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.